Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us is Steven Ehrlich. He's the director of digital assets research at Forbes Crypto, breaking a new story this morning with more details surrounding Sam Bankman-Fried's arrest in the Bahamas. Steven, it's great to see you as always. Long time no see from yesterday. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, and congratulations on breaking this news here. Give us more details around the circumstances behind SBF's arrest on December 12th.
Right. So, as far as I can tell, and based on my reporting, I mean, Sam Bankman-Fried had no warning, no anticipation that he was about to be arrested. I actually interviewed him, which turned out to be his last interview as, I guess, a quote unquote free person, the morning of December 12th. And at that time, after it was done, he was really working on just trying to finalize congressional testimony that he was preparing to give in front of the House Financial Services Committee the following day, alongside John Ray, the current CEO of FTX. However, later that evening, his lawyers received a phone call from the FBI, basically warning him that he was going to be arrested by the Bahamian police in about 40 minutes. And they gave him the option, if he said yes, with some sort of bail arrangement, to leave before to go into U.S. custody before the Bahamian police could get there, and leave the island nation that night on a private plane back to the United States. When that happened, he and his parents obviously were flustered, trying to figure out what was going on. They called some very senior officials within the Bahamian government, including the national security director and the head of the Securities Commission and a high-ranking official in the Attorney General's office, none of whom claimed to know anything about this. But ultimately, the warning did turn out to be true, that he was arrested by the Bahamian police about 30 minutes after they got off the phone with their lawyers. And he had about 5 minutes once the police entered to take some medication, put together a few things, and he was on his way to a holding cell in Nassau to await a bail hearing the next morning.
And Steven, it's alleged that the timing is curious, right? That he was arrested before the testimony to Congress, and that perhaps it was in an effort to silence him. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so the timing is a little interesting. He was arrested the day before he was preparing to testify in Congress, and one of the big themes in crypto, especially over the last year or so, is Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX's close ties to the government. I mean, obviously, much has been made about the tens of millions of dollars that he's donated across political aisles to the Democrats and Republicans, as well as frequent meetings that he's had with Gary Gensler at the SEC, other SEC officials, the CFTC, and basically every other federal regulator that has some type of jurisdiction over crypto in the United States. And in particular, Warren Davidson, who sits on the House Financial Services Committee and is a Republican congressman from Ohio, suggested in a tweet after the arrest that perhaps the timing wasn't coincidental, and that he was arrested so that he would not be able to testify the following morning in front of Congress, and potentially raise what he saw as uncomfortable questions or cast a light on uncomfortable ties and close ties that Sam Bankman-Fried had with Gary Gensler and the SEC in particular, who he claims has kind of been asleep at the wheel in terms of regulating and policing crypto.
Yeah, well, it's not only the direct contacts that he had, but all the smart people in the room who invested into FTX also have political ties. So again, alleged, these are rumors, but to your point, that the timing is very curious. What was life like for him in prison?
So it was a big shock for him. I mean, he was living in a palatial penthouse, I guess, suite on top of one of the most expensive properties in all of the Bahamas, complete with Italian marble columns and Venetian plaster walls. And now he actually was sent to Fox Hill Prison, which is infamous. The State Department has chided it for poor ventilation, poor sanitation, lacked adequate medical care, and that's where he was headed. Of course, he didn't quite go into the general population. He was in the infirmary, which offered him a few, I guess, a few pleasures that were not available to the general population. For instance, he had a bathroom with a door. It was one that he shared with the other 5 or 6 inmates that were in there with him. But of course, the toilet did not flush. He had to pour a bucket of water in for it to flush. There was technically a shower, but it was basically the size of a small phone booth with a garden hose that was used as a faucet There was only one temperature of water, as he called it, hose temperature, which any of us know is not warm enough really to shower unless you really want to take a cold shower. And as I kind of say, his biggest issue at that point, aside from trying to figure out what was going on with his case, he was trying to read his indictments, was essentially going from trying to re-architect derivatives markets to figuring out how to exist as a vegan inside of a prison where they have no experience with this. So his number one or his top priorities were really trying to get peanut butter and bread and fresh fruit that he could eat.
Yeah, and, well, typically that's your expectation when you are incarcerated, that some of those
Right.
creature comforts don't exist. And you made a point in your article that he was untethered, right? Good choice of words there, from the internet. And you made the point that this is someone who has immediate access, who is known for their tech savviness. What was his mental state like? A complete 360 from what he's used to.
Yeah, he told me that he was basically going insane in prison, and his answer surprised me, and he admitted it surprised himself as well. These days, I mean, we're all used to being connected online. Even my wife will get upset at me if I'm on my phone too much, especially after dinner when we're playing with the kids. And he was always online. He's used to always being connected, having the entire world's library of information at his fingertips. And all of a sudden, that shrunk down to the occasional newspaper and some reports of occasional television, and none of which is interactive. It's all kind of a one-way flow, and he can't ask questions. So that was really disorienting to him, and he basically said he didn't realize how much he was going to miss having access to the internet in prison, and that was one of the big reasons why he ultimately agreed to be extradited to the U.S. With bail, so that he could go home and live under house arrest, because a fear was that if he was forcibly extradited to the U.S. and sent to maximum security federal prison like the MCC in New York, that he would have had severely restricted internet access, and that just wasn't something that he was really able to contemplate at that point.
So do you think this is largely why he agreed to extradition?
Yeah, that is my sense. I mean, once he had bail in place, and I mean, $250 million bail is a record, but my sense is yes, that once he had that in place, he was comfortable going back.
Well, I mean, privilege does pay in dividends in this case, that's for sure. What's his life like now in California?
So I asked him kind of what it's like being back home. Obviously, most parents probably don't want 30-year-olds moving back in with them under any circumstances, let alone this. But he more or less said that he's comfortable almost anywhere, and he even said that he would have been able to deal with prison conditions. And again, he was in the infirmary, not the general population, which from what I can tell is considerably worse. He could have dealt with all of that if he had access to the internet. And now that he's home, he's kind of just, I mean, the shades are drawn. I mean, the house, it's a beautiful house, but it's clear that they're trying to be as private as they can. And he's more or less set up shop in his family's study, bookcases of famous works of literature and academic journals, and he has a desk with dual monitors as well as a gaming laptop and a little cot where he can take naps. And his world right now is really just being on the internet, talking with lawyers, trying to prepare his legal defense. He started a Substack, so he publishes articles from time to time about issues related to the case. And but it is a pretty isolated lifestyle because he's under house arrest. So even though he's not in jail, that doesn't mean he's free to go anywhere he wants. Really, the only travel he does is when he goes back and forth between California and New York for court appearances and hearings.
Yeah, well, I mean, sure, his attorneys appreciate just how willing he is to speak to the media and freely publish stuff on Substack. And Stephen, we appreciate that insight. Again, excellent work. I think the higher level issue is it is a bad precedent to set, right? It just, you know, the widening of that gap of the privileged and not, it's playing out in real time here. And, you know, just curious to see how it all plays out. All right, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.